Dear friends, it is an honor to share this space of reflection and especially to be at the same table, at least virtually, speaking with Susan and Beth, who are beloved friends of 17 Institute of Critical Studies in Mexico, and of course with Nicola, who I haven't had the pleasure to meet yet. Thanks, Beth, for this invitation and for accepting my proposal for the presentation. I have to confess that your invitation arrived in moments when I am rethinking my own relationship with disability and the place I have within the relationship with my family. So I apologize if this is a rather emotional talk, but it has helped me to put in paper some of the thoughts I would like to continue exploring in the future. Your suggestions and comments will be very welcome. I was born into a family with 3 brothers, Luis, Marco, and Ivan, labeled as severely intellectually disabled, and a sister, Miriam, labeled as a mild intellectually disabled, who in the last 10 years have developed episodes of epilepsy. Some years ago, my family went through 3 losses in a short period of time. My grandmother, my father, and my younger brother passed away. A few months after these events happened, my elder brother asked me a question that I still haven't been able to find an answer. He said to me, "During the funeral of my grandma and my dad, many friends were with us. They talked about a lot of memories with them. However, when Ivan died, nobody came. Nobody talked about him after that. So I wonder," he said, "is that going to happen to us? Who is going to remember us after we die? Are you going to tell people about what we did while we were still alive?" I was very shocked and amazed at the same time. How a young guy who has been told he's not rationally reliable by doctors and psychologists was able to formulate such profound questions. It is only now, when I see them growing old and entering perhaps into the last stage of their lives, that I have retaken those questions and decided to make sense of them. Last year, while I was still living in Amsterdam, I decided to invite a group of sisters of people with learning difficulties, as I would like to call it, and share our experiences regarding our relationship with our siblings. I was taken by the stubborn thought that first we needed to talk about what love means for us in the frame of our relationship with our siblings. I thought that starting from something I consider is my main bond with my siblings will help to understand how to continue in at least what I think now is my own task, to preserve their memory and make sure people will learn about what they do or what they have done in this world. This presentation, it is more a sort of a puzzle, so please excuse what might appear as disorganized thoughts that they are trying to find meaning in the midst of chaos. Also, please bear with me, my accent that can make sometimes difficult for you to understand some words. I hope that doesn't happen. So I wanted today to take the invitation extended by Plato in his beautiful dramatic dialogue, The Symposium, to talk and honor the God love. Nevertheless, this time I would like to honor him by sharing the voice of siblings of people who have been labeled as intellectually disabled. After the death of my younger brother, I have witnessed the physical deterioration of my 2 other brothers and my sister and my mother. We have done everything possible and also sometimes the impossible, as resources are always lacking to support them. This natural process of the body, as we all know, usually happens to human beings, and we should all be used to it. However, somehow, in the last couple of years, the condition of my siblings has provoked me a profound inner questioning to understand why we, families, would like people like my brothers or my sister to continue living, and what the role of siblings in that process might be. My constant search to integrate the presence of my siblings in my life led me to a dialogue with 5 other sisters of persons with learning disabilities in the Netherlands. As Eric Simacus did in the symposium, I proposed to them that we dedicate some time to discuss our relation to our siblings and the God love. We met in cafes and had long conversations. We sometimes cried and more often laughed. We shared pictures and described anecdotes. We rediscovered the meaning of siblinghood, as one of them told me, and finally we all shared a meal in order to honor the love we all have, each in our own ways, for our disabled siblings. This presentation is my way of sharing with you all at least some of the thoughts shared by these sisters and myself regarding why we want to keep disability alive. In order to do so, I wanted to bring together the dialogue between each of our voices, that of the sisters and that of researchers and academics in different fields. As a methodological note, let me explain that the fact that there were only sisters participating in this small study didn't respond to a criteria that I imposed. It simply happened. I wanted to come here accompanied by real voices, and there was little time and few resources to make this sort of study methodologically less biased. So please bear with me regarding all the limitations which this little study could present, and simply take home with you the relevance of our stories and the value of our family lives. Why love, you might be wondering. After receiving the invitation from Beth to participate in this event, whose topic is figuring disability in Latin America, it took me a few weeks before finding the subject I thought could make possible for me as a researcher, but most of all as a sister, to present something I have been reflecting on that has to do with the chaos the world is experiencing now and the role of disability in it. In the last 10 years, I have been sharing my passion for disability with the one of leprosy. For this reason, my mind immediately went its way, unearthing stories related in various ways with disability and leprosy, memory and personal testimonies. But I needed something that could bond all these concepts. In the field of leprosy, for instance, it is commonly to rely on the stories of Saint Francis of Assisi, who is said found peace in the midst of chaos by embracing the body of disabled persons, more specifically of people affected by leprosy, and who envisioned that the whole of humanity could one day live as brothers and sisters if just they embrace love. In the field of disability, I wanted to take the amazing tale of love between the siblings Vincent and Theo van Gogh that was profoundly marked by the disability of Vincent. However, it was only when I found a drawing that my younger brother Marco made for me last year that says, "I love you, sister," that I decided to link memory, preservation, and disability through love. He explained to me that the drawing represented the two of us bonded by love, and that because of that we will never forget each other. This simple and touching gesture generating in me questions that were, from that moment, impossible to respond by myself. What exactly does that bond represent for keeping their memories alive? How was that bond constructed? Was it because of the nature of siblinghood, the nature of disability, or was it something else? Does that bond teach us something valuable? Do my siblings grow in a human internal sense as much as I do on account of that bond? Could this bond teach something valuable to the world? Thus, I decided to search for answers to these questions together with my 5 interlocutors, Yona, Mikey, Hannah, Yoshi, and Renske. It is quite evident that in times when medical, financial, political, and societal issues appear to take over the debate regarding disability, Academics, practitioners, policymakers, and researchers seem to forget what the narratives of disabled people, as of any human being, are in the end made of, and claim for love. Love itself, and especially in the field of disability, has been avoided. Perhaps, as Lyndon remarks, ethnographers have been far more comfortable writing about cannibalism and incest than about love. The main reason is perhaps, as Yoshi, one of my interlocutors whose brother has a severe disability, explains, love is the most important element in our lives, but impossible to measure or to even define. Or, as Van der Heest, who puts in his own words, love resists definition and escapes from the nets of scientists who want to capture it in their studies. And yet, looking back, it seems as if the initial work of Malinowski, Mead, and Evans Pritchard on love, passion, and relationships is paying back, and little by little, the ethnographer's awareness of her own emotional experience in fieldwork made an openness to the emotional world of the other unavoidable. Yet, somehow love is not yet recognized as a relevant and even an urgent matter to be researched in the field of disability. Not to mention the scarce attention that is given to the essential role that love plays in the world-making of siblings of disabled people. Indeed, the emphasis placed with such intensity on the medical and psychological aspects of brothers and sisters of disabled people by researchers seems to forget that sibling relationships can be one of the most intimate, enduring, troubling, and conflictual relationships that we may experience in our lives, and for that reason impossible to be captured by linear or single disciplinary explanations. The very definition of siblinghood is complex and problematic. Even more complex and problematic is sibling love. We need then to begin by asking, who is a sibling? Especially nowadays when family is an expanded and always changeable definition. Perlman, in Hindle's book, says that the word sibling comes from the Middle English word sib, that could be defined both as a noun as an adjective. As a noun, it means related, akin, the offspring of the same parents. As an adjective, intimate, inclined towards congenial. So the complexity, Hindle says, is also semantic. Renske, another of my interlocutors who has a blind brother, defined a sibling as somebody who is there for the other, for his or her brother or sister, to take care of each other's life, to laugh, to cry, or just share, but even for fighting. Listening to the conversations between my interlocutors, words like care, respect, anger, disappointment, distance, closeness appear as a synonym of sibling. As Flannery explains, in sibling love, intense levels of aversion and pleasure coexist. In my own case, my relationship with my sister Miriam, for instance, has always been one of acceptance and rejection, and I cannot remember when that started. It didn't happen as in Barthes' account of romantic love under the form of a scene whose narration is, we meet and then. No, with my sister it has rather been, we found ourselves there and then, or we were always already together and then, or even we both always return and then. In this sense, I could easily say that a sibling is somebody who is always already there and then. This is a common expression I found in the narrative of my interlocutors, and what that got me into this presentation. They constantly repeat that a sibling is somehow who will make sure that a disabled brother or sister is fine, and that nothing will harm them or will make them suffer. In other words, a sibling is one who is always there and then. For me, this was an eye-opener that had never crossed my mind. For in previous analysis I did about siblinghood and disability, I discovered myself performing the role of a sister, a father, a friend, a mother, a carer, such as I recognized in the dialogues I initiated with other friends. I was never conscious of the tremendous role we play in preserving disability, as if we, the siblings of disabled people, became a kind of intimate activists for the conservation of disability. And here, I believe, lies a relevant contribution from siblings for a deeper understanding of the meaning of reconstructing unity and preserving diversity. Allow me to explain this in detail. Rosemary Garland Thompson defines disability as perhaps the essential characteristic of being human. Her argument claims for the recognition that disability as a witness of our inherent susceptibility or receptiveness to being shaped by the particular journey through the world that we call our life. If this is right, as Garland Thompson states, there are many more reasons from a bioethical perspective to conserve disability than reasons to get rid of it altogether. Here, I would also like to use the verb conserve, which she underlines as meaning to maintain a person or a thing in continuous existence, to keep alive, existing or flourishing, to preserve intact. And these are precisely actions that are present everywhere in the stories I share with you today. As in the words of Micah and Yona, who told me about the time when her sister Svea was operated in order to prevent the progress of a severe scoliosis. They explained how difficult that moment was, but also how proud they were when they saw their sister recovering well and generally being alive and kicking. Or when Renska said how much she would be willing to give in exchange to see her brother accepting who he is, and that he is doing well despite the pain and emotional difficulties he faces. Or like Hannah, who has a brother with some cognitive impairment, and yet states that she wouldn't by any means want a different brother, that he is as he is and that this is fine. Which takes me back to my initial question. Why do us, siblings, want to conserve disability? Why do we want to continue supporting our siblings even after our parents are gone? Especially considering how many studies emphasize the burden implied by disability. I am tempted to answer immediately by saying that the main reason is love. Yet, I think that the process to arrive at this answer is more complex than just supposing that love is a constant that takes many different forms and nuances. For which reason, I would like to use the approach taken by Garland Thompson again. According to her, disability is as a source, and not a mere deficit or burden. As such, it should be analyzed as a narrative resource, as an epistemic resource, and even a moral resource. As such, being a resource on the basis of its contribution and value, its protection and conservation should be a logical consequence. As a vivid narrative resource, disability allows for a continuous encounter with characters and voices. Let's look back to the story of the Elephant Man, who didn't only serve as a sort of medical guinea pig, but also as a spectacle for the society. Thousands of silent stories of disabled people killed during the Second World War, during the implementation of eugenic laws, or even nowadays in many institutions in the name of normality and population control. These were narratives that, as Arthur Franks asserts, are opportunities to develop voice, to fight against the disqualification by society, and to create bonds with different human beings by sharing vulnerability and mortality. Disability helps to create self-stories. To interview Jonah and Mikey, two sisters of Svea, offered me the possibility of understanding this clearly enough. Despite their common bond with their sister, their personal tales with Svea are of different shades. Mikey is more concentrated on making sure Svea is physically and emotionally fine, while Jonah is also into the idea of having fun and enjoying life with her sister. As she puts it, I love to spend a Friday night with Svea, to bring her mattress downstairs. She has a special mattress due to her back problems. We watch a movie and enjoy this time together. It is fun. Sadly, the grandfather of Svea, Mikey, and Jonah passed away, and I attended his funeral. I had the opportunity to observe from far these three different characters bonded by love, memories, and the family spirit. The three looked so independent and at the same time connected to each other. At that moment, I understood that although each of them might have their own narrative about disability, there was still a place for just one story in common. Creating stories of self and finding allies through them not only allows cultural work that in cases like well-known disabled people such as Stephen Hawking are visible enough, it also teaches us about the becoming disabled of all human beings. As Arthur Frank argues, sooner or later we all become a wounded storyteller. And it is through such narratives that love somehow and in different forms makes an appearance and bonds the siblings amongst themselves and amongst others in a kind of constellation. I had the opportunity to listen to Renske and Steve, her brother. She openly explained about his attempts to commit suicide. He did it vaguely in our meeting together, yet they talk about their mutual love and how they felt it is as real in different moments when an attempt has happened. I remember Renske said, when he was in hospital and all of us were around him, each of us told him how important he was for us, how much he meant in our lives, and how much we love each other. That was a very special moment, and we all knew we love each other. Steve, for his part, remembered one of those episodes when being in hospital he received a letter and a cassette from Renske with a song about being a brother. This was very important to me. I knew then that my sister loved me so much. Epistemologically, disability is also a resource. Narratives of disability transmit knowledge, they create a knowledge, and they capture knowledge. As Garland Thompson says, our bodily form, function, comportment, perceptual apprehension, and way of mind shape how we understand our world. Yet the problem is that somehow the knowledge produced by disability has been considered as a subaltern knowledge and as a mere experience, consequently devaluing the knowledge offered by such an experience. Scully calls this embodied cognition. The work of Henry Nouwen brims with examples of this kind. Nouwen, a Dutch priest and theologian, transformed Adam, the young man with severe impairment of whom he became a carer at the Daybreak Center, part of the ARC community in Canada, into his masters. Adam's knowledge then transformed the life of Nouwen himself as that of the hundreds of people who came to know them. For instance, an ill-rich lady from New York who was invited by Nouwen to have dinner with him and Adam, after 3 hours of silent communication with Adam, Nouwen said she learned something different about her own life. In fact, we learn because we all are wounded healers, Nouwen concludes. As such, what siblings of disabled people learn about themselves, about their siblings, and about life in general is tremendous. Knowledge in narrative are about text and context, and in the context of siblinghood, we learn to love and to hate each other. We learn that we live in the process of learning how to be siblings, and that is an endless process. Just as Hannah illustrates, I am very proud of my brother. I love him, of course, but I also learn about how to deal with myself when I encounter difficult situations. Situations where he is involved or where someone else is involved. Of course, I always learn. Personally, I believe this happens because in many cases we have to struggle with ourselves in order to understand what our position in life might be, who we are and who they, our siblings, are. However, we are not the only ones who learn through disability. Through our sibling relationships, other people also learn about life and about their own potentials. Yoshi shares her multiple encounters with friends who have accordingly changed their perspective of life on the basis of their acquaintance of her brother Mace. I remember having a friend who was even supported of abortion in case of detecting impairment during the period of pregnancy, she said. However, after she met Mace, I believe something changed. She told me that she didn't know how much people could learn while sharing with disabled people. I truly believe many of my friends' ideas about disability have changed because of Mace. Finally, as an ethical resource, disability furnishes the basis for bonds in which love occupies a critical position. My initial question about why us siblings and not only our parents want to continue supporting our disabled brothers and sisters despite the negative and pessimistic view of disability which is socially so widespread returns once again. My interlocutors have responded that the only reason for playing the role is ultimately love. Overcoming medical, economic, and social problems is possible only by loving our siblings. Not even the judicial pressure imposed by the responsibility of being blood-related is stronger than love. For instance, Hannah says, I will always be there for him. It is not about me being responsible for my brother. He is my brother, and this is essentially the ultimate reason for accompanying him, always. Examples regarding the trilogy Ethics, Love, Disability are common. A public case that clearly gets the idea across is that of Emily Rapp. Her son died when he was 3 years old after going through the impact of the Tay-Sachs syndrome. As the article published in the Times in March 2013 states about her, Rapp is the parent who most moms and dads hope they never become. Tay-Sachs disease brings blindness and seizures and paralysis before it kills children, typically before their 3rd birthday. However, when asked about her experience, Rapp says, it was agony and ecstasy, and the extremes of those experiences. It is agonizing to watch your kids suffer and lose them. The ecstasy comes from the fact that he was still my kid and I love him. When he died, I was glad he wasn't suffering anymore. I was relieved, which was agonizing because he wasn't here anymore, but a little bit of ecstasy because he was free. However, I would give up all of this stuff if I could have my kid back. This agony and ecstasy is what Diona, Renska, Yoshi, Mikey, and Hannah experience, and it is also what I experience with my brothers and sisters. In my conversations with my fellow sisters, issues about fears regarding the future and the deterioration of our siblings' bodies were mentioned many times. We struggled with the idea of them being alive with pain and perhaps without support, while we are also struggling with the very idea of our lives without them. As Renske said, I understand the pain my brother struggles with. I know he suffers because of the severe headaches, eye pain, and his anguish because these symptoms don't have any cure. However, I struggle with the idea that he will probably not see my children and that he might decide to go before I even have my children. I want them to know him, to learn with him what I have learned. The unique ethical experience that disability brings into our lives, I argue as a sister, needs to be rescued and understood within the discourse of disability. It has to do with human dependency and attachment, but also with interdependency and freedom. It is about making decisions every single day that will have an impact in the life of our siblings. It is about dying a little bit with them, but overall making life happen in many different ways together with them and because of them. A great number of our decisions are ethically bound to disability and the well-being of our siblings. For instance, my interlocutors and I discuss the impact that having a partnered relationship has in the life of our siblings. Ethically, whoever we choose as partners make a difference in the relationship with our siblings. Mikey explains that deciding about who is with us, a partner, will be influenced by who has been and will continue being with us, our siblings. Personally, I had a long journey of reflection before making the decision about who I wanted as my partner and companion, knowing that, for me, having a relationship was not only about loving somebody and building a project together. It was also about how to include him with my siblings in that life project even after their eventual passing. All my interlocutors said that even if our partners don't have a good relation with our siblings, our work is to make things work, to make it possible for them to understand each other and live with each other's singularities. Yona and Mikey shared with me the experience of introducing their boyfriends to their sister Zwea. It was as if we had to wait for her approval before accepting them, they remarked. Ultimately, the ethical gift that disability offered each of the participants in my research, including me, is, as Gabbard explains, the opportunity profoundly to love another human being. And yet, the very idea of making love the main component in people's lives seems irrelevant to scholars and practitioners in the politics of everyday life. How might our contribution and that of our siblings be taken seriously in order to bring about change? Yona, Renska, Hannah, Mike, and Joshi have mentioned many times during our conversations that the knowledge we have should be used more in research, when making community programs, when creating social policies, and especially when talking about us. It is interesting to observe how the world we now live in pays more attention to hatred than to love, as if both might be separated. When somebody tells us that he or she hates us, we have no doubt. Yet, we always doubt when somebody talks to us about love. Disability helps us to learn about sibling love, about love in general, I might say. So we need to transform disability from a mere narrative resource into a full counter-narrative that challenges obsolete ideas about what love means. In this sense, we might say that we need to take recourse in love in order to conserve love. The practical and political uses of this argument are not at first glance easy to identify. I know. The work I have pursued in my intimate circle of friends and relatives may serve as an example. There is no friend or relative who hasn't learned about my siblings and their contribution to my life and to our lives. Yet no policymaker has ever even considered the possibility of including siblings as storytellers whose testimony might bring about change in neighborhoods and communities. Politically important, ethically relevant, and humanly intrinsic to our common condition, disability is in the world, as my interlocutor says, to offer giftedness. At this point, before I conclude, I would like to invite you to understand the topic of siblinghood in disability not only in relation to us, the literal siblings, but also as a means to recover the very meaning of brotherhood and sisterhood in the wide world and to make evident its enormous potential to bring about change. Perhaps in the way mentioned in relation to St. Francis, who located brotherhood in the embrace of the so-called lepers. My call concerns the possibility of a wide recovery of kinship through the experience of disability on the basis of that stupid thing called love. I want to thank you for listening to this. I hope you could understand everything. And I know there are questions from you all, so I'm here to answer, and thank you so much.